Hey everyone. So I'm got this set up a little bit differently today. This is my second um, live stream that's been scheduled. I've done a couple of kind of here and there streams. One of them was earlier this week to create the countdown. So today I'm going to go through and do some additional stuff inside of After Effects. So I started out these with Animate a little bit. I plan on covering, or rather working in just about every Adobe application that's available. One of the big differences with this stream is this is the first time that I'm presenting on Mac OS. So the other times I've been doing it through my Windows 10 machine. I'm cross-platform. And, that's cool to be able to do that. So I've got my MacBook Pro hooked up with my iPad Pro, and it's off to the side where I can see my OBS settings and everything. So let's have a look here. Right on. So I can look at the chat as we're going through this. So, feel free to chat about anything that you might want to mention. I'm just going to go through. I'm going to explore the essential graphics inside of After Effects. So it's something I haven't really looked at that much, but I can definitely see how it could be useful. And I'm going to create like a little title sequence and hook it into Essential Graphics so that we can export that as a motion graphics template. So that should be fun. All right. So first thing I'm going to do here, let's make sure everything's cool over there. Yeah, everything looks good. So I'm going to create a new composition first of all. And let's see. Just going to call it titles. 1080p is still kind of like, for me anyway, like really big. So I might take this down to 720 here. Yeah. And I like a frame rate that's just a solid 30. Background color is fine as black. I prefer it. Awesome. All right. So what I was thinking for this sort of like title sequence kind of thing, or like some kind of an intro that we could be repurposed across like, many different things. There's a couple things we could do. We could have some kind of like background imagery. We can have some text that we can change based on the circumstances and so forth. So I've gone ahead already and I've grouped in my essential graphics panel right here. So we can select a composition now that I've created one. So I've got my titles comp right here. Let's go ahead and select that. And there we go. I'm just going to call this titles or something of that nature. Oops. Titles. Missing an E there. Right on. All right. So we're just going to pop back and forth here. We're going to create some motion and some assets within our comp. And then we're going to hook that into the Essential Graphics panel. And if you don't see the Essential Graphics panel, you can always go to Window and just open up Essential Graphics from right there. And there's also, I believe, yeah, so there's an Essential Graphics workspace as well that you can go ahead and open up. So cool. I'm going to go to my comp view here. And let's actually start creating some stuff. The first thing I'm going to do is create a solid inside of my timeline. New solid. I'm just going to call it BG for background. 960 by 720. Let's make that comp size. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I see. We're at a weird pixel ratio here. Let's cancel out of there. Go to our comp settings. See if we can't fix that. I want square pixels for sure. I don't want any of that nonsense. So we're going to do 1280 by 720. There we go. That's a nice 16 by 9 aspect ratio. That's exactly what we want. Hit OK. All right. So now that we've got that going on, what we're going to do is just fit that comp view to the actual window here. And I got to create my solid. I'm going to create a new solid. And now it's 1280 by 720, which is what I want. I'm going to name that BG. And yeah, it doesn't really matter what color I make this because I'm going to add a gradient to it anyway. I'm going to hit OK here. It creates the BG solid for me within my composition. So what I want to do is make kind of like a neat little sort of like ephemeral kind of wispy gradient kind of doodad here. So I'm going to select this guy and go to my effects menu. And let's see. Generate. So I can generate a 4-color gradient here. I could also just do a gradient ramp, which, you know, that'll give me 2 stops instead of 4. I'm going to just do gradient ramp. And automatically, I'm going to have a white to black gradient ramp applied to my solid. And you can see it in here in my effect controls. Expand that out a little bit. I've got the room, so why not use it? And now I can choose some colors. I'm going to go down here. Something like a kind of burnt orange sort of color here. Blue. That's kind of neat. You put a little more yellow into that. Reminds me a bit of the ocean. Gosh, getting notifications. Let's go ahead and put on that do not disturb. There we go. Hopefully that takes care of that. And it's going to give a peek here into the chat. Looks like there's nothing going on right now. That's fine. All right, so we got here, we got the start of the ramp. And we've got the end of the ramp. Let's twirl that down in here under effects, gradient ramp. There we've got it. So I want to make adjustments to both of these. Hello, Giancarlo. How are you? I'm going to tick the stopwatch on for both of these guys. Oops, not the color, the start and the end. And of course, I can go ahead and change this from a linear gradient to a radial gradient. Good to hear. Thanks for joining. Just playing around with me taking a break. So I'm doing stuff within Animate all the time, so it's like an everyday thing. But I do use just about every application inside of Adobe Creative Cloud. So even though my focus is on Animate, I do like to kind of play with additional things. So today I'm just having a look at the essential graphics panel inside of After Effects and how that's used. It's something I haven't really messed with before, so I'm exploring. So, part of this is I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing inside of here, except I'm just kind of creating stuff. But yeah, I've got some other Animate things lined up for sure. And in terms of Animate, I've got actually my new features course on LinkedIn Learning just updated a few days ago with the new stuff inside of Animate 2020. So if you're curious to see what's new inside of Animate 2020, I definitely say, check that out for people who aren't used to Animate. After Effects and Animate are interesting because they both kind of can do a lot of similar things to one another, but it's fun to kind of like pop between them, especially since I'm more used to Animate than I am with After Effects. So, diving into After Effects and doing some stuff like this kind of gives me a little bit of, it's like exercise, So, yeah, I mean, in terms of this, we can move these little, the little start and end ramp positions around. You can see how that works here. You can make some kind of interesting things, and it's interesting inside of After Effects, I've got to say, that the way that you set the gradient positions is through an effect. I mean, I guess After Effects is all about effects, but I remember when I was initially like messing around with After Effects years ago, and I wanted to create a gradient. Usually you go up here and you're like, oh, I want to create, a little shape. So you create a rectangle tool, a rectangle with the rectangle tool rather. And then you're like, okay, how do I create a gradient? And you can only apply a solid color to it, and it's completely like what am I doing? So it's a very different process from working in Animate when you have like a dedicated like gradient transform tool, and you have the ability to just specify like, yes, I want this object, this shape, to have a linear gradient or a radial gradient or a bitmap fill or a solid color or whatever. It works very different inside of After Effects, which was surprising to me because a lot of the things that both programs do are, of course, quite similar. So I'm actually going to keep this at a linear ramp, as it's termed here. And let's go ahead. What do we got? 30 seconds to this comp. So let's go ahead here and go to about 10 seconds. And we can even use the selection tool to modify these different ramp beginning and end points. So if I wanted to sort of just move these around in sort of a counterclockwise motion, I can do that. So there we go. Let's go ahead out to 20 seconds. Shift these guys around a little bit more. Cross my ocean. What is nice if you're working in both Animate and After Effects is that this mechanism right here works exactly the the same. So the ability to jump to previous keyframe or to the next keyframe. You got these little arrows here, and it works the same way in After Effects as it does inside of Adobe Animate. So that's kind of nice. And I'll go to the end here. And let's see. Yeah, it's pretty good. Of course, we go ahead and hit that space bar to kind of see it in action in real time. And I don't have enough stuff layered up here yet where it's lagging, which is nice. Because with After Effects, you can definitely get that. I'm always, when I'm dealing with gradients inside of any application, I'm always worried about banding. I don't see any banding right here. But something you can do always to get rid of banding if you do see it, or to even ward it off before you see it, is to add a little bit of noise to your object. So I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to go ahead with the same object, my solid here. Let's see. I don't think it's under generate. Yeah, it's under noise and grain. So noise and grain has a specific category inside of here. And I want to add some grain to this. So we add our add grain filter here. I'm going to make this grain, let's see. There is a way to make it sort of monochromatic, which is what I want. And with After Effects, it's kind of cool that you get this little preview. So it doesn't have to render the whole thing, right? Because something like this, grain, that has to generate grain texture across the entire thing, it can get very, very intensive as you go through. And if you try to preview it, you might not get a real-time preview from that. So let's have a look here. You change the viewing mode to something like final output. Yeah, it's actually keeping up, which is nice. So good job. Good job, Apple. And AMD. I think I have an AMD processor on here. Yeah, doesn't matter. Yeah. Hey, Seth. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I mean, I love working in motion, and whether it's vector or bitmap or whatever, it's always neat. I always remember the first time that I used Macromedia Flash to make a little ball roll from like one end of the screen to another, and I exported that as a little projector file. I didn't even export it as a SWF. It was just a projector. So for those who don't know, a projector is like, it's like a little combo you used to be able to create, and you still can actually inside of Adobe Animate. You can bundle the runtime, so the Flash Player runtime, with your SWF content that you produce inside of the program, and then distribute that as an executable file either on Windows or Mac OS. And it's fun to be able to just like click on the thing and run it and just see something you created like come to life. And even something as small as this, I mean, it's just cool to see it actually happen. Motion is one of those things. I mean, I like everything, I mean, I like working in Photoshop and Illustrator and making, just like static stuff too. I don't like using Photoshop to do motion. I know a lot of people use the motion tools in Photoshop. I'm not a fan. I think there's a lot of better tools out there for doing motion. But I guess if you're used to Photoshop and you like to stick with what you know, it can be a good sort of gateway right into motion. But I think definitely if you're really interested in motion and coming from, you know, something like Photoshop, have a look at After Effects, have a look at Animate, because there's so many more tools inside of these programs. And the workflow is just incredibly better. That's the thing that bugs me about Photoshop. The workflow is just not there for me anyway. And granted, I am coming from a background that is more motion focused, but yeah, give it a look. So that's looking okay. I mean, it's not too bad in terms of the grain. I do want to, yes. So here's what I'm looking for right here. Under color, there's a monochromatic switch. And I always think that monochromatic grain looks a lot better for me. So I always keep that on. Of course, we can go ahead and change things like the intensity, the size of the grain, the softness, and all of this. Let's pull the actual size down a bit. Maybe even the intensity. And what this is going to do is this is going to stop, if we do have any kind of like weird banding going on, this is going to help get rid of that. And it's also going to go ahead and, just make it a little bit more interesting, because I love grain. I love grain. I love high contrast. So I come from, creatively, I come from like a 35 millimeter, film photography background. Just a few years before film was, slated to be destroyed, right? So right before the digital age, when, you could definitely like get a scanner and scan your film negatives into something like Photoshop, which is how I got involved in Adobe stuff in the first place. But you were kind of working between two worlds. You're in the analog world where you are dealing with film, and you're dealing with light, and you're dealing with chemicals, right? And you need like a dedicated space. You need a dark room, and you need equipment like an enlarger and, a negative holder and all this cool stuff. And it was cool, but you've got to like, I remember used to driving down to New York City to like get chemicals from Adorama and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it's so different now in terms of still imagery and working with stuff like that. I still love it though. But motion is just like so completely different, because you can actually take even that same stuff that you create inside of something like Photoshop and, just make it, even if it's just like a simple pan, or if you add a little grain to it, like whatever it is, it's great. It's great stuff. So let's go ahead and fit this up again. Want to see the entire thing, because we need to start adding some text and other elements to this if we're going to hook any of this stuff up into the Essential Graphics workspace, which I have right here. So let's go ahead and just kind of twirl that down and lock it. So I have locked my layer. And the next thing I'm going to do is kind of create some text. So if we're creating some sort of like intro text here, I definitely need to use my type tool, which is what I think it's called here, a horizontal type tool. Okay. And that's another interesting thing when you work across different Adobe applications. you get different terminologies between teams. So, this is a type tool. It's the horizontal type tool. In other applications, it'll be called the text tool, even though it does the same exact thing. It's very, very interesting, right? All right. Let's go ahead and add a title to this. I'm going to put it up. Let's put it up here in the corner. So again, we are creating something in the Essential Graphics panel. So what I need to do is create something that somebody can modify when they bring it into like Premiere Pro, Premiere Rush, whatever. I don't want to use Helvetica. And one thing that is nice about Essential Graphics, as I understand it, is that if you do use Adobe Fonts, that those Adobe Fonts will of course sync to anybody who's using this. So they don't necessarily have to have the font already installed. If they choose to use your particular motion graphics template, it should prompt them to actually either download and install the fonts from Adobe Font, or, it's possible that it could just do that automatically. I'm not sure because I haven't done this before. So let's see. I've got a bunch of Adobe fonts installed already. Maybe I'll choose something like Serenity, which I've been using a little bit lately. Changing my character settings a bit, make it a little bit bigger. And gonna have to change that paragraph settings. So I have that aligned over to the side there. Maybe even give a little more room just in case. Right on. So you can see that the text tool, the type tool, when you create a type layer, it automatically names it to what you place inside of the actual thing here. So if I want to make any changes to this, I can of course select it and make those changes here. So I'm just messing around, really. I do want to add a drop shadow to this. I want like a nice crisp drop shadow. So I'm going to go to Effect, Stylize. Not Stylize. I don't know where drop shadow lives. So here's a trick. Like if you do go to the Effect menu and you can't remember the category something is actually in, you can always go to the Effects and Presets panel, because the Effects and Presets panel actually has a search. So if I look for drop shadow inside of here, well, look at that. It's under the perspective category. So always one thing about After Effects that is interesting is that it's got like a lot of effects, right? There we go. So already that looks pretty good. I am going to make some adjustments though. I'm going to take the opacity up a little bit, but I'm going to take the softness up quite a bit too. Well, let's take that opacity down a little bit more, because I don't want it to be like, too pronounced, but I definitely want it to be there. Looks like we got 7 people on the chat, which is pretty good. I think last time when I did this last Thursday, and by the way, usually I'm going to do these on Thursdays for a scheduled stream. I'm just doing it on Wednesday today because I'm tied up tomorrow. So Wednesday is the day for this week. And I'm trying to think of how to communicate my schedule to people because it's kind of rough. There's not like a mechanism in place to do this sort of thing. So, I don't know. I'm just going to work with it. You know, one thing I always like about MacBooks is the touchpad. I don't think really can be beat between other things. I have, attached to my Windows machine an Intuos 4, so a stylus and a what's it called? Tablet and a stylus and so forth. And it's really nice for drawing things out, but the MacBook Pro touchpad just works so nicely, and it's just so tactile and fluid. That looks pretty good. All right. So we got that going on there. We could have this actually, let's see. We could have it come in from the side. We could have it do any number of things, right? I think I'm going to go ahead and just take the opacity of this from 0 to 100 across across 2 seconds here. So I'm going to move my playhead back over here to the beginning. And let's twirl this down a bit until we get to our transform properties. And I'm going to toggle the stopwatch for opacity. Just take that straight down to 0%. We'll just have that come in 2 seconds to 100%. That's pretty good. Let's preview it with the space bar. And right now it's pretty linear. Actually, let's take this out a little more closer to 4 seconds. Then we'll add some ease to it. So I'm going to go into my graph editor here. I always like the graph editor for ease. And we'll just have a nice, smooth ramp up for that opacity. It's a little too quick at the end there. Let's hit that again. Too fast. That's probably going to be okay. Let's toggle that back off. All right. That's much smoother, much nicer of an ease. All right. So I've got my title. I'm also going to have some kind of like a little subtitle that comes in. So let's go ahead and make some adjustments to our composition to account for that. We'll do that again using the type tool, but first off, I want to use my rectangle tool. And I want to create just a little doodad here. It's going to just fly in and serve as the background for this thing. Go ahead and make that black. And my transform properties, I'll take that opacity down. All right. 30% looks pretty good. 31% as it's noted here. And what we're going to do is add some additional text. So I'm going to grab my horizontal type tool. I can even lock down these additional layers if I want to here. And let's go ahead and draw one out. Just like that. We're not going to use demi bold in this case. Let's just do thin. We're going to add in some subtitle. And that is going to be aligned in my paragraph settings to the left. And in my character settings, I want to make this a lot darker. Make it black. I don't know if I want it heavy. Extra looks pretty good. Let's keep it at that. All right. So what do we have here? If we look at the whole thing, we have our title that comes in. We've got a subtitle and my leg's asleep, which isn't good. We have our gradient that's kind of swirling around a little bit. And actually this goes on for a little too long, right? So if we look here, and this is one of my weaknesses with After Effects is everything I do, I just give it a little more time than it needs to breathe. So let's pull these down a little bit. I'm just select these keyframes, just drag them over. All right. And we can preview it like that. All right, so it's definitely starting to slow down now. You can tell. One thing we can do to mitigate that is to toggle off our add grain. You can see that speeds it up. Yeah, okay. That's pretty good. Let's actually set this guy. We'll do 4 seconds, 8 seconds, and 12 seconds. And we'll have everything fade out by 16 seconds. So as I'm thinking about this, let's go to our composition settings. Right now we're at 30 seconds. Let's take it down to 16 seconds. There we go. Right on. Okay, so with that done, let's twirl some of this down, lock it all down. It's all good. We need to animate the subtitle and also the background of the subtitle. So let's unlock both of those. And we want the title to come in first. So we can move these fellows like this. And then for each of them, we're going to toggle opacity on. And then just add a keyframe in each one right here. Go back and just pull that down to 0. So what we got now is title comes in, fades in nicely. It's nice and big. And the subtitle comes in. And then around this point, we want them to sort of go away. So when they go away, I'm just going to have them sort of start at 13 seconds. We're going to change the position of all these objects. So we're going to need some subtitle position. We're going to need the shape layer position. And we're also going to need the title itself. So place title here, position. All right. So we're going to have these fly out. Let's go to 15 seconds here and take that position. I'm going to shoot that off to the side. Shape layer 1 position. Have that go down to the bottom. And let's see. Inside of our subtitle text, we'll just shoot that guy over to the opposite side from where the title leaves. So if we go back here and have a look. Yeah. It looks like, you know, it's kind of cheesy looking. I need to stagger these quite a bit. Yeah. So let's start with the subtitle. Let's get that out of there first. We're going to select that. And then we're going to have the background drop when it's almost out. It looks like some kind of like 1980s, like, you know, welcome new employee. Let's go ahead and get started. Here's a training video on VHS kind of thing. I didn't intend for it to look like that, but that's the feeling I'm getting from it. Which is really kind of interesting. Right on. We can, of course, add easing to any of these. So maybe we should do that. Turn on my graph editor once again. Oh, and of course, it's a pain when you're dealing with position because it's broken into two different pieces here. Dimensions. So let's separate those. And then I can Alt Option. Just to kind of make this a little bit smoother. And down here. Separate those dimensions once again. Yeah, you see how it does it really weird by default. Yeah, that's so much better. It just like starts off like really, really slow. And then it just drops. You know. So we got that guy. And then for this last one. Of course, we're gonna have to separate those dimensions again. This time we're dealing with X instead of Y, which is cool. That's a lot smoother, you know? I mean, I do this in Animate all the time as well. It's like you gotta apply some kind of easing to this stuff, or, you know, it just looks so just robotic and like lifeless, even though it's moving, which is never a good thing. It's completely different from what you want to have actually happen, you know? So let's turn off our graph editor. There we go. Let's preview all this stuff. Actually, before we do that, I want to kind of lock all these down. So I'm responding to a message here. I think I've done it in a way where somebody's asking for my email address. And I'm fine with sharing that, but hopefully I've done it in a way that like web scrapers won't be able to grab it and like just like put a bunch of junk in my email. I do know though that, I mean, these streams, I don't think that the Behance streams actually preserve the chat at all. So, you know, it's probably fine. So, yes. Perfect. So how many people we have on here now? 6. Oh, now 5. So what I looked at was 6. Then it was 5. So not a whole lot, but it's okay. Because I'm just goofing around anyway. Inside of After Effects here. And yeah. All right, so we got everything locked down. Let's go ahead and just play this back. See how it looks. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that's pretty good. That is working out. And, oh my gosh. There we go. So now that we've got all of our elements in place, I'm trying to think, like, it looks like it's really missing something, but since this is so generic, like I'm just like messing around inside of Essential Graphics just to create a motion graphics template. Honestly, what is it missing? Who knows? Could be anything. So let's go ahead and get to the essential graphic bits. So if I open up the essential graphics panel here, I've got my name and master, which both happen to be the same. Let's just call it motion title. I don't know. Just so they're different, right? And what we're going to want to do is set our poster time. So inside of our comp, we're going to pull the playhead to something that's indicative of exactly how things look when it's actually ready to go, right? So with that, if I go to Essential Graphics and set poster time, there we go. We've got an image of what this thing looks like. So let's now go ahead and start adding some bits and pieces here. So this area right here is where you can add the different properties inside of Essential Graphics where, whoever you hand this off to, or even if it's just for your own use, right? Like maybe all you want to do is like change the title or change the subtitle every time you actually produce something. So these are things you can actually specify that they're changeable inside of Essential Graphics. So let's go in here. We go to title and subtitle. We control both of those down. So you notice inside of text, we have this property right here called source text. If we go to Essential Graphics, I can click and drag this property directly into Essential Graphics. This is for my subtitle. I'm going to call this subtitle. You can change the names. And there we go. Let's go down to the actual title. Scroll down text. There's our source text property. Drag that into Essential Graphics. We can rename this as title. Of course, there's other things we can do too. So maybe we want to change or like leave the color, right, of the title or the subtitle up to the user. So for that, let's find where that lives. So any of the motion stuff, I want to be in control of. Like, I want to mess with that. I don't want to put that in the hands of the user. But of course, I want them to change the text on each of these. So that's all I'm going to expose. That's interesting. So we can enable custom font selection. I wonder if that's how you get the text color in there, because I'm not seeing it otherwise. Because, it's not really something that's exposed down here inside of the properties. You don't get text, color. So let's go ahead and actually do that. For both of these, I am going to enable custom font selection and font size adjustment. Yeah, but there's no color, huh? That's weird. So again, this is my first time actually messing with the Essentials graphics panel inside of After Effects. Yeah. Of course, let's see. I could always add like other effects to this, but it just doesn't seem like it's something you would need to really do. So it's, yeah. It's definitely something I would have to look into afterwards, right? Anyhow, it looks like that's most of what we can do today. Of course, you could go through and, apply any of these other potential properties to this. So if I go in here and if I wanted to change, leave the opacity up to the user, I could do that. The different anchor points and so forth. How about drop shadow? That might be fun. Take the opacity of that drop shadow. Make that something exposed through Essential Graphics. And this is the drop shadow for the title. So title, drop shadow, opacity. Right on. Okay, so once we have this created, we can always, of course, go ahead and export it for use. So I'm going to go ahead and export a motion graphics template from this composition. Every time I save it, it wants to jump back to my composition window, which I don't want. There we go. So destination can be a local drive, a local templates folder, or it can be a Creative Cloud library. So let's see. I'm going to pop this in APRD, which is the department I work for, I teach for, with the University of Colorado Boulder, advertising, PR, and media design. And yeah, that's cool. Let's do OK. And there we go. We should be able to actually use this now in any sort of video-based application we want, right? So if I wanted to pop open Premiere Pro and use it in there, I could. I believe these are also available inside of Premiere Rush. So that would be fun. Right on. So I'm trying to think right now, if there is something that can be done. I mean, there's definitely some stuff lacking here, right? And I could just picture obviously you could put like some kind of a soundtrack in, and some still shots that kind of zoom in and everything. And I'm just really caught up on this whole like employee training video from the 80s kind of thing. And unfortunately, I did neglect to back on my background layer to re-enable my cool effects for noise. Add grain. So yeah, we haven't seen this thing in all its glory quite yet, unfortunately. Wow, I've got 10 people watching. Hello, everyone who's joined in since we last checked. Thank you for coming. Be sure to note anything in the chat. But we're probably wrapping up pretty soon because I've created my little, there we go. My little composition here. We've exported it as a motion graphics template to be used in other Adobe applications. Yeah, so with the add grain effect on right here, it's absolutely not running in real time, right? Unless it's already been rendered. So you can see it's already rendered here, so it's running really quickly. Oh, there they go. And you can see how that green render line shows up inside of After Effects. And here now everything's going to render appropriately in real time as it goes through. It works. It's great for a little late 90s employee training video, which was completely unintentional, but that's what it turned out to look like. Yeah, and here are the different things that a user can change through the Essential Graphics panel. So, I don't know, this is my first dip into Essential Graphics, and I mean, definitely it's cool that you can go ahead and expose these different properties. As noted, it's a little weird that you can't change things like character properties and so forth, unless I'm like really missing something. I don't know. So like character properties like the color. I mean, you've got font, you've got style, you've got size. But what about color? It's pretty important. Anyhow, I think that's probably good for today. And I mean, there's other stuff you can do too, of course. This is After Effects. Let's go back to our comp here. Something that I find kind of fun, if we toggle our switches and modes here, we've got our different blend modes up top. If I change my title, we can do like a dancing dissolve on our title. If we play it back, right? So It's actually going ahead and adding like all these weird little fuzzies to everything, right? So, gosh, there's just so many things to do inside of After Effects that it's like you can just play all night with it, you know. But I really do like grain, as mentioned before, towards the beginning. I like grain. I like contrast. So I just wish it wasn't so expensive, to add grain to things, especially in After Effects. Whether you're doing a dancing dissolve on text, or if you're simply just adding grain to your background like this, it definitely kind of slows things down a little bit, unless you have it already done. But anyhow, um, that's it. I mean, I'm done exploring the essential graphics panel in After Effects and Essential Graphics. So I guess that's the end of the stream. So thank you anyone who's joined in for joining in. And I will be doing this every week, at least once a week, normally on Thursday evenings like this. Or this is a Wednesday, but normally a Thursday. I had to switch it this week. But potentially like a couple of smaller kind of like impromptu streams every week. It all depends on what I'm doing. But this is a cool platform. So I'm happy to be here and be doing this. All right. Have a nice evening, everyone.